We got our special guest on the line to start off the 7 o'clock hour. He's a man who's on a bus tour right now across the Midwest, the East Coast. That is Gerry DiNardo of the Big Ten Network. Gerry, good morning. Thanks for joining us. You were here in Lincoln on Friday. The question we have for you off the bat is, where are you right now, Gerry? Where is your next stop on the bus tour?
I am in Chicago. We have a morning practice at Northwestern, and then we go to State College, Maryland. No, it's Rutgers, Maryland, maybe Ohio State, Indiana. I kind of lose track after that. I got to look at the sheet. I can't memorize.
You're just long for the ride and look at practice and make notes. So let's go back to your time in Nebraska. You guys started things off in Lincoln, Gerry. Now I'm curious. You guys did a couple things about Jeff Sims, the culture in general. I want to start with Jeff Sims, the quarterback for Nebraska. Again, we have not seen him besides the spring game here in Lincoln. When you saw, what were your guys' initial impressions of Jeff Sims, the likely starter for the Huskers this upcoming season?
Well, when you look at the quarterback, you're really looking at the offense, right? So I thought they were far along, or right where they're supposed to be with the run game. I mean, it's going to be an aggressive run game. They're running scheme, the gap schemes are side option. I thought that looked very good. So I think Sims handled that very well. Sims in the run game is, I said this to Howard on air. I mean, he looks like a big physical tailback. I mean, not that they're going to be an option team, but that's part of everybody's offense now, because it helps the offense get the numbers the way they want in the box. I thought the pass game was behind the run game, and I think that in most cases, for only 3 quarterbacks in the league that are coming back. Everybody else has a first-time quarterback, so I don't think this is going to be any different than where I go, where if they have this style of offense, meaning a physical run offense, mixing in the option, I think all quarterbacks are going to be further along in the run game than the pass game. So that's how I saw it. I saw Jeff as, obviously their starting quarterback. He fits their scheme. He's a first-time quarterback in that scheme. And I think the pass game has some work to do.
Hey, Jerry, I just want to back up a little bit. When you come to a school, when you go to Northwestern today, you came to Nebraska, what are you looking for? I mean, when I go to a practice, my eyes are darting all over the place. What do you try to lock in on?
Yeah, I start at the line of scrimmage. I either offense or defensive line, it doesn't really matter. But before I go anywhere, I want to see what they are, see what they look like at the line of scrimmage. So in Nebraska's case, I thought their offensive line was fine. I actually thought the line of scrimmage was better than I had anticipated. So that's where I start. And then after that, it really depends on the team. Then I went to Sims. Then I wanted to go to quarterback. So, by way of example, last year, I rushed to see CJ at Ohio State. I mean, he's a known quantity at quarterback. So line of scrimmage first and everything else. As a Bill, this. I mean, you love to see coaches coach. Who are the best teachers? How do they present themselves? What's the head coach's role if it's a new head coach? I just mean all those kind of organization things. Sometimes I'll get caught off guard. It happened to me the other day when Howard asked me, because Dave Remsen wasn't with us, so Howard was kind of hosting the show, about specific names. I don't do a great job at learning everybody's name in the offensive line or every linebacker or something like that. I want to know the line of scrimmage, the quarterback, and then I love the structure of practice and the way everybody goes about their business.
Coach, Bill Bush here. I really enjoyed the segment, and you talked about on the show of Nebraska's review about the message and the messenger and Matt Rule. And obviously your resume as a head coach is incredible. Tell me what you saw in his message and how he was able to relate with the players.
Yeah, Bill. So Nebraska's a little unique for me, right? Because I go back to 1972 Orange Bowl, Coach Devaney's last game, and then obviously my Colorado history. So I've always been a guy who's watched Nebraska, and I always have this saying that if you've had greatness in your past, you can have greatness in your future. Nebraska's testing me on that theory. But they've had some conference changes and some things that no one else has really had. So for me, I follow the coaches that we have had since I've been in the Big Ten Network. Bo who I thought was a terrific coach. Obviously, public relations wasn't a strong suit, and he had some issues there. Mike Riley, I think a wonderful guy, but not a great messenger, right? I mean, you'd have to be with him one-on-one really to know the kind of really good guy he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Scott Frost, I thought Scott thought just because he played there, he had to reach out. I think Matt is a guy who's so approachable, and it reminds me of when I went to LSU. The state owns you. I mean, you're their property. If you embrace that and you understand that, I think the narrative around programs like Nebraska and like LSU, the fans have to be on your side. You know, alienating a fan base like that is just counterproductive. Being aloof with a fan base like that is counterproductive. And what I've seen from afar with Matt is that he has embraced the state of Nebraska. Well, he's the same way on the field, right? You're not two different people. So I think he's approachable to the players. He's approachable to the coaches. He coaches the groups. He'll move around. It was just, I think, I hate to say this because ultimately most of us get fired, but it seems like he's a perfect, not just a football at Nebraska. As you guys know better than I do,
mm-hmm.
you have to be outwardly thinking to your fan base. And I could see why he's so good at it, because he's so good at it. My comment was, when the message is good, when the messenger has the ability to deliver the message, it usually works. And that's what I see in Matt Rule.
So about Gerry DiNardo, BTN, making the rounds on the bus tour throughout the Big Ten. I'm curious, Gerry, you guys saw Minnesota this weekend in Nebraska, of course, on Friday. The first game of the season for the Huskers is at Minnesota on Thursday, the 31st of this month. Do you see a team at the Gophers that's way ahead of Nebraska from the one practice? How do you kind of compare the two schools in your visits to them?
Yeah, this is really, this has ever happened to us in week 0 that we've seen the teams. Yeah, the difference is, and again, Minnesota only had 2 offensive linemen coming back. They have a new quarterback. I mean, they have some questions, but what jumps out at you at Minnesota is that's a 7-year program. I mean, PJ has been there 7 years. They have depth everywhere. I mean, the Bills question, you walk around practice. What I was impressed about there is every position has depth. I mean, they run well. I think this offensive line coach at Minnesota really is good. I mean, he's constantly developing these offensive lines. The defensive line was long at defensive end. They were thick at defensive tackle. So the difference is, from 10,000 feet, you could tell this might be this guy's first year at a program, and this might be a guy that's been at a program for several years. It's established. It has more depth than Nebraska. Obviously everybody knows the routine. It's the same routine that these kids have been going through since they've been there. So veteran program, rookie program, I think is the best way I could describe the difference. Now, Kaliak-Manis is a great talent. I mean, he can spin it. I doubt they're going to be 70% run like they were with Tana and Mo. I mean, this Kaliak-Manis could be a big-time quarterback.
Did you think Nebraska had enough depth up front on defense?
Well, I think it's better. I don't know that you ever have enough depth up front on defense. The way the game's being played now. They're rotating defensive linemen in there because you're defending the spread and you're constantly in a pass rush or you're constantly chasing someone down. And so depth at the defensive line, no, I'm guessing Matt's not happy with it. I don't know that many coaches would be. Coincidentally, we're talking about Minnesota. I would think Minnesota is, but again, This is 7 years in the team, and nowadays, who the heck is anywhere 7 years?
Yeah, good point.
Gerry, I'm curious. You mentioned that the pass game seems behind the run game so far in practice for Nebraska. A lot of questions regarding the offensive line for the Huskers in the past couple of years. And what do you see from the O-line in your visit to Nebraska?
I see them better. I really do. I see them better. They lack some depth, and they're not where, again, to go back to the historic perspective of Nebraska. I mean, think about the offensive lines during the history of Nebraska, right? They're not there yet, but they certainly can get there. They've got big numbers. I know they've changed the rule how many players you can have at practice. The other thing that Matt did that was not very unusual, but unusual. And I do believe, you guys could ask him, that he got this from Coach Osborne, because he has mentioned he wasn't used to rosters being this big, and he talked to Coach Osborne about it. And Steve, I don't know if you've been to practice, or Bill, if you've been to practice, but they have a circuit, which is pretty common, but it's team circuit. So, everyone's getting a ton of reps. I want to say I counted 11 cameras out there. And I said to Coach, how can you possibly watch all this tape? But the reason I have 11 cameras is they have all these team drills going on, and everybody has to be on tape. And so one thing they're doing probably, which is a throwback, is the young players who probably will never see the stadium this year in a real game are getting as many reps sometimes in practice as the first team. And that's unusual. You need the facilities for it, you need the coaches for it, and you obviously need the equipment like the cameras for it.
Gerry, you guys are visiting Western today. You said, I'm curious, that's obviously a mess with Fitzgerald out, the whole hazing situation, the new interim coach there for this season. What can you take away from practice? What are you looking for today in that situation that they're inheriting there?
Well, before the crises, they had only won 2 games, I think, in the last 2 years, and I think they're 4-20 since they won the West. So before the crises, I was, seeing the talent level. Players play, coaches coach, and so you win 2 games in 2 years. I mean, it's got to be somebody's fault, And so I don't think they had the players in past years, and I thought the recruiting wasn't what it was like in other places, and so. There's not much we can do about the crises. We're all in a very difficult situation, as you can imagine. With what we say and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We respect what they're going through and have our own opinions that, we can share some, we can't share others.
Mm-hmm.
And so I honestly just want to look at the team. The coaching staff is upside down and everything else. So I just want to see what kind of players they have. How many guys are left in that roster that really can compete in the Big Ten. I'm guessing that of the 14 schools, they may have the least amount of talent, but I don't know that for sure.
Talking about Gerry DiNardo, Big Ten Network. I'm curious. Obviously, this past weekend, Oregon and Washington were admitted to the Big Ten. Now, 18 teams, possibly more on top of that. Gerry, do you view? I mean, now that's 4 schools from the West Coast of USC, UCLA, Oregon now in the Big Ten, a truly coast-to-coast league. What is your initial reaction to those 2 joining the conference, and also the Pac-12 basically dissipating as part of those teams also go to the Big 12?
Yeah, just the obvious stuff. This is about the money, and this is about people that are in an arms race, they're in a salary race, and they really can't keep up with everybody else. I mean, you look at Florida State. I mean, they've made this point. They have basically said we cannot compete with what we're getting paid with in the ACC. Well, I think the same thing is true about the Pac-12. So I think that's pretty obvious. What bothers me the most is when this first started with USC and UCLA, not enough attention towards the other sports. Football has the least amount of problems when it comes to travel. I'm concerned about the student athletes that play twice a week, volleyball, lacrosse, whatever those sports are where basketball, where it's multiple games per week. You're going to say to a student athlete at Oregon, hey, you have Rutgers on Saturday. You know what? As long as you're there, you might as well play Maryland because you're on the East Coast. And then stop at Penn State and we'll see you next week on camp. So I'm concerned that there's not, and maybe they're thinking about it and not sharing their ideas. I made the comment at Nebraska when this first broke. I think it's time to revisit East and West. Especially for the other sports, but even for football. You could take the 4 Pac-12 teams. I think you go Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, wherever you divide that up. Try to keep your permanent crossovers as your traditional rivals. But let's try to make the West Coast teams travel not much different than it was when they were in the Pac-12. So whatever it was from LA to Washington, take that by way of example. Or take the worst, take an Arizona team playing at the Washington in the old Pac-12. If that was acceptable, if that was manageable, figure out how many miles that was. Now start at the West Coast schools that are joining the Big Ten. go that many miles east, see where we wind up. And certainly for all the other sports, let's go east and west, but even let's consider it for football as well. Everything else is pretty obvious. I mean, it's about the money. You know, it's about everybody paying their bills, and it's not about 12. You know, they've always had issues because of time zone. You know, so people don't grow up watching. If you're not on the West Coast, you don't grow up watching Pac-12 football because, you know, it's too late at night. So they've always had this issue with how many people are watching and how much money they're getting paid.
Gerry, I don't know if you do predictions or not, but who do you like in the Big Ten?
Well, without seeing everybody, I picked Penn State in the East.
You did?
Yeah, I did, and we didn't really. I don't remember anybody asking about the West. And I usually don't make that kind of prediction. I'm not even sure why I did, but I mean, I know why I made the prediction. I don't know why I agreed to answer the question. I usually don't do that, especially until after the tour. So yeah, I think Penn State's a really talented team. You know, I still think, guys, there's if you want to call them old-fashioned values, like not revenge necessarily, but young people are still motivated by what they haven't achieved, and I think James Franklin does a very good job with this. Ohio State's had a tremendous amount of recent success. Michigan's had a tremendous amount of success. Penn State only lost to Michigan and Ohio State last year. And they got a rookie quarterback and this and that. I just think that, young people are still motivated by things that they want to achieve, and they haven't. And so Michigan's a two-time winner, as we all know. Ohio State's had a lot of success. I think Penn State could be the hungriest team of those three.
Jerry, regarding Nebraska, I mean, the fans are just obviously starving for a bowl game. It's been since 2016. They've been 3-9, 4-8, 2-6, and they had some rough stretches. I know you can't see a lot after one practice, but I mean, the schedule's gettable this year for Nebraska. Do you expect this team to be in a bowl game this postseason?
Well, I said this after watching them that, when teams, I want to say in the last 2 years, you guys know better than me, Nebraska's lost 12 close games. And, there's a lot of reasons for losing close games, and we can all pick at the reasons. But I do think, to my point about Penn State, I do think that's motivating. Even though there's a new coach, those guys on the team know what it's like to lose a close game. And I think that's motivation for them. So I came away by watching Matt structure his practice, early in camp, watching the enthusiasm, looking at the talent, that, I think they're better equipped to win the close game. So if I'm right about that, then they go to a bowl game because their schedule is doable. And so if they can avoid the just end of the game letdowns, I think yes, they are in a bowl game. Again, I've only seen two schools, but at some point I'll be able to match the talent up with Nebraska to the other 13. I really can't do that now. So it's hard to answer that question.
Coach DiNardo, Bill Busch again. One last thing, we have something in common in that obviously you coached at LSU, and I was there for several years. I was on Coach Orgeron's staff at LSU, and here in Nebraska this time of year, people talk about how it's humid. Can you explain to people what real humidity is like at LSU?
I'll tell you one thing, Bill. If anyone that I coached, in fact, I was talking to one of my ex-Bengal players the other day, and he asked me he's a coach. He asked me what mistakes I had made. I said, coming from the North, the heat issue in the SEC is just, it's overwhelming. And I'm just happy that everybody survived what I was doing, because I didn't really, it's hard to describe what it's like there. I think Kelly's practicing half inside and half outside and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's crazy, Bill. Right?
It's really
hard to describe.
It is.
I live down. I live in Florida, so I get it. This tour is great for the weather for me. It's like my vacation.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
It's like my condo on the ocean.
Jerry, always great stuff. Enjoy the rest of the BTN bus tour. Appreciate your time. We will chat with you again down the road.
Okay, guys. Thanks for having me.
Gerry DiNardo, Big Ten Network